Hey everybody, welcome to the Bourbon Hour live photography chat. Today is January 1st. It's a new decade, 2020. So this is the first episode of the Bourbon Hour for this year. This is episode 10. So we're going to go ahead and jump right on in. Cool. All right. Well, let's go ahead and jump right into some photography stuff. And where do y'all want to start? Anybody got any photography news they want to talk about? No? Okay, cool. Well, it's actually a new year. I hear you. I'll let you jump in a second. We got a lot of things coming up really quick. This month we actually have the Imaging USA, which is happening out in Nashville, which is a really big photography conference. It's much like the Photo Expo that happens up in New York at the Javits Center. I believe the Imaging USA is actually managed or somehow related to the PPA. So if you're a PPA member, you get discounts and stuff if you want to swing out to Nashville and check it out. Actually, if you're a first year member, it's completely free to go. So that's a cool benefit if you just joined up with the PPA. We also have CES coming up pretty soon out in Vegas. By the way, Jeff, are you going to CES?
No, when is it?
I think it is the first part of February, middle of February. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's January. No, it's in January. So.
I've actually never gone, but I've always wanted to go.
I used to go basically every year when I was an IT guy, because I was really techie and I wanted to see everything. Because CES is not photography specific; it's technology specific. So it's the consumer electronics, whatever. But a lot of camera companies and stuff, have booths and do announcements out there. Actually, Nikon is doing their announcement at CES coming up of their new camera and some lenses, etc. They're announcing a new full frame DSLR, the D780. They're announcing a new compact camera. And they're announcing a couple of lenses. Their Z mount for their mirrorless 70 to 200 2.8 that everybody's been waiting forever for. And they're also
I remember last year that Sony was going to make a big announcement, and everyone thought it was going to be the A7S III. And I was in this meeting, and I'm like live streaming it under the table, and I'm looking down, and they're doing like this really long intro, and they're like, Sony innovation, and it's just going on and on and on. And then after like 20 minutes, they're like 8K TVs, and I'm like, God. 8K TVs.
Oh, that's great. Actually, I am looking forward to seeing what the actual specs are on that 780. Because one, I have a 750 that I absolutely love. And that's one of my workhorses, and I love it because it is still one of the best low light cameras there is. And I prefer it even over my 810s, which are my workhorses. And they're saying that the 780, it's still going to be a 24 megapixel. It's a DSLR, but it's going to have the backside illuminated sensor, so it's going to have even better low light performance. It's going to have the newest processing engine, so the low light is just going to be phenomenal, hopefully. Another thing I'm excited about with it is they're doing a hybrid autofocus on it, so you can do mirror down and have the standard 51 point autofocus that the previous versions have had, but they're going to do a mirror up that then integrates the autofocus system of the Z6, which has 273 points and 90% sensor coverage. So you get the autofocus of a mirrorless, basically, in that DSLR. And since it is, basically the same as the Z6, I'm kind of hoping and assuming that also means that it's going to have eye autofocus. Since the Z6 and Z7 have eye autofocus. I'm not claiming it's as good as Sony, but it is there and it does work, to an acceptable extent. So, you know, I'm excited to see that. And I mean, honestly, at the $2,000 price range, it's definitely a consideration instead of jumping over to a mirrorless and having to get all new glass or deal with an adapter, you know? So.
How much is it going to be?
Right around $2,000. So that's usually their entry point on that middle of the road full frame DSLR. Because when they announced the 750, it was $2,200. I think, yeah, I paid $2,200 for it when it first came out. So, yep. And Jim Carnes has joined us. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Not too bad. How y'all doing?
All right, we're doing all right. Sitting here, relaxing, drinking some bourbon. We were talking about upcoming things happening, you know, in the coming months, like Imaging USA and CES, and jumped on the Nikon rumor announcement that they're going to be announcing 2 new cameras and 2 new lenses at CES in a couple weeks. And,
yeah, that's going to be exciting.
Yep. So, cool.
Good stuff.
Other than that, we got some other events coming up the first half of this year. We got Shutterfest coming up in April. We've got...
You there.
Yeah, I'll see you there, actually. We are definitely going to have to hang out. They have another Shutter event happening out in Vegas the first part of February, and that is, for some reason, it's on the tip of my tongue. What? Obscura, yep. That's happening out in Vegas.
To WPPI and actually is free to attend if you're there for the event.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they sent out an email for enter to win it for free or something like that. So I'm assuming that means if you're not attending WPPI, you can get in for free without paying a fee. But I don't know. I saw the email the other day for it. Down here, which doesn't matter to any of y'all, there is actually a photo conference happening in Oklahoma City in March. And it is being hosted by Bedford Camera, which is a fairly large camera store chain all throughout, you know, the entire middle of the country. And that's kind of our Midwest photo conference that's happening in March, and I forgot the name of it, but it is in March and it's in Oklahoma City, so I'll look it up here in a few minutes and mention it again. But yeah. Who else has got some photography news? I know I think it was Steven starting to say something.
Me? I don't have any news. I have wishful thinking.
Oh, yeah? What kind of wishful thinking do you have?
They would come out with a Nikon D900 already.
Really? You're already tired of that 850?
You know, it's like when you said there was more focus points over a greater area of the sensor, I would like to have that. That's really...
I'll tell you what, the autofocus system in the 850 is pretty damn nice compared to, you know, the 750 and the 800 and 810. But yeah, no, definitely the coverage of the mirrorless is pretty much one of the only draws. Coverage of the autofocus system and in-body stabilization. Those are my 2 biggest draws to mirrorless. Everything else, I'm like, you know. I could really care less about how light it is. I really am deterred by battery life, you know. So,
what kind of battery life do you get on your Nikon?
My 810s with just a single battery and not a battery grip, I can usually shoot 1,200 shots.
Not bad at all.
Yeah. So, and the 750, I've never ran a battery out on the 750. I'm not one of those that shoots 1,000 shots ever of anything. Even this wedding that I just did, at the end of the day, I had under 800 shots. So, you know.
How long was the wedding?
What was that?
How long was the wedding?
We started shooting around 2 o'clock and we wrapped up and left about 9:30.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I did a lot more than just, you know, the normal wedding stuff. I did all of she didn't do a separate day for bridals and stuff, so I did all of that before the wedding. So it was all done same day. Now, you add in the shots of my second shooters, that put me upwards of, you know, 1,800. But me personally, you know, So.
Oh yeah, no. Getting into weddings, I had no concept on what was par, what was this, what was that. So I shot around where you're at.
Yeah.
But now our weddings, we're averaging about 4,000
All together with all your shooters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All together.
Yeah.
So just 2 shooters.
Yeah. What? So you're saying that you shoot about $2,000?
Yeah, right around there.
Okay. Yeah. No, I figured that was about par, just from, I know a lot of wedding photographers, and I've asked, and at the end of the night, I felt like I had shot so much, and I looked down and looked at, the image numbers. I was like, oh.
No, just knowing like how much we shoot to get what we do.
Yeah.
If I see like a certain price or a certain number point, I start getting worried. Like if I see like 1,200 images on what I'm doing right there, I'm like, okay, I need to shoot more.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that I didn't do a whole lot of reception stuff. I didn't walk around shooting all the candids.
Okay.
So that's probably where my number definitely was decreased by a large bit. I obviously stepped in and did the first dances and did the cake cutting and did the the bouquet toss and the garter toss and the toasts and that stuff, but I didn't walk around doing all of like the candid just reception event photography at all. So
when you're shooting a wedding in Arkansas and they're both related to each other, how do they know which side to sit on?
That's terrible to say, because we are talking about my family in this wedding. Oh, Jeff.
So what are some of the Arkansas differences that you see in weddings, or have you like seen in weddings? It was very interesting. I do Northeast weddings, but then I've done Midwest weddings, and they have some very different arrangements.
Well, I am not a wedding photographer, so my wedding experience in the Northeast is nil.
Okay.
So I really can't state any noticeable difference personally.
Okay.
I was kind of surprised that the whole tradition of the groom is not allowed to see the bride until she walks through the door to walk up the aisle with her father was completely out the door, and apparently that's kind of common now, because they wanted to do first looks and all of that outside before the ceremony.
Nice.
And I was like, okay, cool. One more thing to check off the list before the ceremony, So so I got all that stuff knocked out ahead of time, and I was completely cool with that because it actually made it a lot more relaxed. I didn't feel rushed in doing any of it. So
I love it when clients pick first looks, because you get a lot of the creative stuff just out of the way, knock it out. A lot less just crammed in small timelines later on.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, it was very casual and very laid back and relaxed the entire time. Even though, I mean, I literally was hustling the entire time, and by the time I got home, I was just like, holy shit, I felt like I ran a marathon. But, I didn't feel like that during the process, So
Oh, yeah, no, I've run on that high. I love it. It's kind of the hero mentality when you're in the moment, but it's also you're part of the family.
Well, and technically I am, but
well, yeah. You are family.
yeah. So
no, it's awesome.
Yep. So I actually I reached out to a few wedding photographers around here and put the word out that I'm available as second shooter, and once I get a little bit more content of my own to market with, I think I am going to do some campaigns on that.
Nice.
And I don't think it will ever be my primary, because I really enjoy other things more. But it is definitely a good income if you can do it well. So if you can do it well and establish a brand recognition for it and get the higher end clientele on it, then it's definitely worth it to, pick up, even if I picked up 10 or 15 weddings a year, one a month or whatever, that could definitely be a pretty decent little income just in itself,
Oh yeah, 10 weddings a year, it's $6,000.
Yeah, exactly.
Easy.
Exactly, because you cut out all your costs and everything, and you're still walking with 40, at the end of the day, at the end of the year off of that.
Yeah.
So.
No, it's not too bad. It's not too bad at all.
Yep.
We're starting to move out, pushing business towards Jersey City and New York City just so we can raise our prices.
Yeah. No, definitely. The closer you get towards New York City, the higher you can go.
Oh, yeah.
And then once you start stretching out there onto Long Island, then you're golden.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sitting right between Philly and New York City, so.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, cool. So that's wedding stuff. What else is going on?
Don't forget, I don't know if you're in the area in February, but February 11th and 12th, B&H has their Depth of Field conference.
I am not in the area, but I am aware of that. Yeah.
It's not too bad. We did it this year.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I actually, was it last year? I don't think it was the Depth of Field conference. They had some kind of small thing that I went to, not last year, but the year before. And it was a B&H hosted and sponsored thing. And I also I actually did a wedding thing that was an Adorama sponsored thing that they brought in like top wedding photographers from around the country. And each one had a different part of the wedding that they were doing instruction on. It was an all-day thing, and they had a venue in Manhattan. And I went to that. That was actually pretty cool. That's actually, if you look at, some of my stuff, you'll see like it almost looks like engagement shots, and it's Juliana with a black guy.
Okay.
That was actually at that event because they were the engagement station, and I forgot who was instructing that. I think it was it Jade? Laura Jade, or maybe it was, no, I think it was Vanessa Joy was the instructor on that station.
She I took one of her classes back in 2017 over in Shutterfest, and I still use everything I learned from that course. Mm-hmm. I used every single wedding.
Yep. So
she's got a lot of. Not only is she a phenomenal wedding photographer, but she runs a tight ship on her business,
mm-hmm.
and she's a really good instructor too.
Yep, and she's Jersey local too, right?
Yeah, yep. Yeah, she's Jersey side. Maybe
I think she's down towards Freehold.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, right in that area.
Yep. So, no, she's definitely a phenomenal wedding photographer, and she's very well known. And I see articles and tutorials and stuff from her pop up all the time. So, yep. Cool. Speaking of tutorials and stuff, I actually am starting to get my calendar together for my own educational workshop stuff. This one's a new one for me. Everybody keeps hounding me about Capture One because they know that I use it. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to do a full-on welcome to Capture One workshop, and I'm doing it online, so it doesn't matter where you're located. As long as you have an internet connection, you can attend. And it's going to be a solid 4-hour in-depth, start to finish, full overview from, your very first catalog through, exporting your final images. Like the whole kabang. It's not going to get specifically in-depth on, this is how we do high-end retouching of portraits, or this is how we do high-end retouching of landscapes, or blah, blah, blah. But basically, it's just going to go through all of the inner workings, getting comfortable working with, basically walk away with a full understanding of how to use Capture One and give you a really good, starting point for you to then go, okay, well, I want to tailor it for my headshot, business. And then you can look into the additional things you can do specifically for your processing of your genre, So, and I feel like I priced it reasonably. I priced it at $50, And I mean, honestly, $50 for a workshop of any sort, I feel is a value, especially if it's something you're going to actually learn something from. And I've got I'll put the link whenever I upload this to YouTube. I've got the full syllabus. I've already outlined the entire class and created the syllabus and everything that I have in the actual sign up page. So you can see everything that's going to be covered. So, yep. Cool. And actually, for y'all are in my Facebook group. If you go and click on the link I have in there, you can see the syllabus and everything lined up on it. So, and I'm already starting to feel a little bit of a buzz, or else I'd try and list it out for you, but whatever. What else?
What's up with your camera tonight?
I was wondering about that. That's probably why.
My camera is actually on and recording, but it is recording to OBS, not to Zoom. That way I don't have to... basically, since I'm not streaming live to YouTube, I'm recording via OBS, and I can't use the camera for OBS and Zoom at the same time. So, whenever people watch this on YouTube, they're going to see me, and I'm going to be sitting right there above the column of everybody else's videos. It's just it's streaming to OBS, so, or recording to OBS.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the only other way for me to do it that way would be set up a second webcam and have one pointing to Zoom and one to OBS. So, and I only got one webcam. Oh well. For now. Actually, I was looking to see if there's any decent 4K webcams yet, and I'm not seeing any. So I think what I'm going to do is get one of those HDMI that you plug your camera into, and then plug that into your computer so you can use your actual camera as a webcam. I have it saved on Amazon. Somebody else told me about it, and so I was going to hook up my my little M50, which I can shoot 4K in, and use it as a webcam. And it's like $100 for that little adapter. I'll have to look it up and show it to y'all. But yep. What else is going on news-wise, guys?
I just got the R4, the A7 R4.
Oh yeah, they finally delivered it to you?
I'm a little jealous.
Yeah. How much have you shot it so far?
What's that?
How much have you shot it so far? Mister, I shot 60,000 photos last year. for a non-wedding photographer.
Yeah, so I only know that because when I was selling my R3, everyone was messaging me, and the first thing they'd say is, "What's the shutter count?" I'm like, I don't know. So I figured it out, and I've had it for 2 years, and I was at 120,000 pictures for 2 years, and it's probably been about even over the 2 years. So I figure about 60,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I have my own studio. I shoot a ton. I'm here like 6 days a week, and I've done three or four shoots on the R4 so far. I found that like the depth of field is a little bit different on it. So like if I'm shooting at like 5.6, which is where I usually shoot, like 5.6 or 6.3 or something.
Yeah,
it's got a little more shallow depth of field. The buttons are a little bit different. The focusing modes are a little bit different.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's got shallower depth of field. The only way that would make sense to me, logically, is if the sensor was somehow slightly larger than the previous, the R3.
Yeah, I don't know. The focusing modes are a little bit different. So I got the R4, and I also got the 90mm macro. So when I do like beauty shots, you can like diagnose melanoma.
Yeah, that's where it's at. If you're talking about your depth of field shooting with the 90 macro, that's exactly what it is, because you can get closer to your subject and still get focus, because you don't have that minimal focus distance of like an 85 portrait lens. So being able to get closer to your subject, they're closer to your lens, which is part of the equation in figuring out what your acceptable plane of focus is.
Yeah.
So that's why you're getting shallower depth of field. It's not the R4, it's actually the lens.
Well, I shoot mostly with my 24 to 70. I usually shoot full body, so I'm with my 24 to 70, and I put my 90 on when I'm just doing just beauty shots.
Cool, man. I actually have shot the R4. I shot it back in November. It was when I was doing the blackout workshop up there in Manhattan. And one of the
John has it, right?
Yeah, John swung through and was like, "Here you go, play with this," and handed it to me with the 85 whatever, Sony glass. And I played with it, and I liked it, actually. I really liked it. I enjoyed it. What I didn't enjoy was whenever I got those 61 megapixel files on my computer and started trying to play with them.
Well, I just feel like it's like file size is a little bit more of a precious resource now.
Whoa, what is that?
So,
Who is that?
What?
There was some major distortion going on. It's all good. Yeah, file size.
Yeah, so I just feel like, I'm a lot more deliberate with my shots, which is good. And I just, like, instead of testing my lights with, like, 2 or 3 shots, I test one. I'm like, okay, let's not go crazy here. So just feeling a lot more deliberate with everything. And when I'm doing like burst mode stuff, like I shoot a lot of athletes and stuff, and I'll shoot burst mode. And when I had the R3, when I shoot the burst mode, when I'm on my UHS-2 card, it's pretty fast buffer. And then now I'll shoot it, and then I'll look down. I'm like, oh shit, I got to buffer like 13 images.
I was actually going to ask because I'm not a burst mode guy, so I was wondering how the buffer held up with those 60 plus megapixel images.
Yeah, it's a little. It's still pretty fast.
Right.
But it's
a dual UHS-2 now.
Yeah.
Whereas with the R3, you only had one.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, but it's still card write speed deliberate or dependent.
Yeah, and it's larger files, so it definitely a bit down. They could have increased the internal RAM so that there was a larger buffer to retain the images while they were being written. But it's not going to make it write any faster. It just would allow you to capture more images until you let off the shutter, and then it continues to write them to the card.
Buffer's still 30 images.
Yeah.
Right? Jeff?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't shoot burst that much. But what's great is, sometimes I'll be shooting someone and I'll do a full body fashion, and then I'm like, your face looks so good right now, and I want to come in and I'll say like, hey, don't move, I'm going to come in close. And now it's like I have this 61 megapixel full body
and you can just crop in.
Crop it. It's
yeah.
totally fine.
The one thing that brings me to the one thing I actually didn't enjoy about it. And yeah, I understand when you're talking about file size, but the file size wasn't so much of a deterrent to me because to be honest, storage nowadays is cheap. Right. And if you have a behemoth of a editing system, it's not really going to bog it down either. So that wasn't too much of an issue to me. What I found was there was too much detail. So when you come in and fill the frame for a headshot at 61 megapixels, there's too much detail. It looks too sharp, too realistic.
Yeah, I was editing this beauty shot today, and this girl, like, it's like the detail on her teeth. I'm like, I gotta
do teeth smoothing. I'm going to create an action for that, teeth smoothing, and throw it into my action set. And people are going to be like, what's this for? I'm going to be like, for those people that have an R4. Oh, shit. Oh, by the way, guys, real quick, just so you know, because I would forget, this is what I was talking about. The Cam Link. And basically what it allows you to do is you plug in your camera to the HDMI on here, just like if you were, connecting to a TV from your camera. And then it converts it to a USB so you can connect it to your computer and then use your camera as basically a webcam. And it does full high def and 4K. So, yep. Just so everybody knows what that is. And that's Cam Link. Y'all can find it on Amazon. But, yep. All right, back to, so yeah, I mean, that Sony R4, it is insane. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that I wouldn't. Especially if somebody gave it to me, I would absolutely take an R4. And hopefully they gave me some good glass to go with it. But for really tight head crops, headshot stuff like that, where you're actually filling your frame in camera to take the shot, that detail is insane. And like you were saying, I felt like it was too much. I felt like I needed to do more editing because of it.
Yeah, it's funny. So if you shoot in JPEG mode, which I haven't done yet on it, and I don't plan to, but I heard that the JPEGs on that camera are 45 megs.
Oh, wow.
JPEG mode.
That's crazy. 45 megs for the JPEG on it.
Really funny discussion, because that was a big issue that I had, where the studio that I used to manage had as well. They were dead set not moving beyond the 5D Mark II. Mm-hmm. And the biggest issue is anything newer than that had too much detail. Yeah. They didn't want to do it. Way too much detail.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, even like the 800 series on the Nikons, which are 36 megapixels, and I mean the R3 was 40, right?
42 or something.
Yeah, I mean that is almost too much detail. I mean, there's times that I enjoy that much detail, but there's times that I'm like, I would have preferred to shoot it with the 750 at 24 megapixels.
It all depends on what you're trying to do.
Exactly.
On the back end.
Yep.
Right tool for the right job.
Yep. Exactly.
Unfortunately, I love my R3 for everything weddings, but
that's a great camera
for shooting horse shows.
Yeah,
but I tend to do that because we need to crop in on everything, and I don't need to lose the resolution until I can pick up a 400 to 600 lens.
Right. Yep. Oh, that was the other thing I was going back on that Nikon announcement earlier. The other thing that actually looked kind of exciting to me is they're announcing their 120 to 300 fixed f2.8. So that would give me that 135 focal length, which has become like my favorite like portrait focal length if I have the room to use that length. And it would also give you that all the way up to 300 for shooting like nature and stuff. No, it's not a 400 or 600, but 300 millimeters is still a pretty decent telephoto, and it's a fixed 2.8. So
that'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, that's one of those things that I've always, thought it wouldn't be smart for the camera manufacturer, but for me, if you could give me like a 50 to 250 fixed 2.8, that would be the only lens I owned.
Well, they do have that out there. I mean, it's going to be a 3.5 to a 5.6, and it's going to...
No, that's what I'm saying. If you could give me a wide aperture fixed that did that kind of range, I know it would be a tank. It would be huge, but the only way that they could do it is charge $10,000 for it, because they would lose the sales of all the other lenses to you. Yep. So while we're sitting here chatting, I saw Jim Stainer joined us. Good evening, Jim. How are you?
Doing well. How about you?
I cannot complain. Where are you at this evening?
I am heading through Kansas City towards Dallas.
Kansas City to Dallas. That's not too bad of a haul.
Well, I started in North Platte, Nebraska via Omaha and then Des Moines. So yesterday there was a lot of snow up there, and I'm glad to be going the right direction.
Yeah, good for you. I'm glad you're going the right direction as well. I actually saw your post from one of the lots where you said nobody honked their horn at midnight. That's a shame.
I know. It's the first time I've ever been in a truck stop on New Year's Eve. I'm usually out doing something far more fun.
Yep.
But I thought the place is going to go crazy. There'll be guys out shooting guns off or whatever.
No, that's a Texas thing, not a Nebraska thing.
Gotcha.
And all I got to say to all my Texas fellas out there, because I am a Texan, is, yeah, we all enjoy shooting, but don't shoot your gun up in the air because those bullets do come back down. Just saying. So, but yeah, well, man, be safe driving, be safe hauling down that road, but definitely keep on the line and feel free to interject and talk all you want. I know you're on the phone, so you don't see the screen or anything, so.
Interesting what you're saying about the resolution and megapixels, and you're thinking that sweet spot is maybe around 36. When I went from from crop to full frame, that was one of the really big drawbacks. Is the giant file size just take forever to manipulate and to work with, and I really hated that.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost thought it was a step backwards at the time. So it's interesting now that the big dog is like 62 or 64 or something like that.
Well, unless you go up to like a Fuji or something where you're up at the 100 megapixel.
But isn't the new Sony like 64?
61.
Yeah.
61. And the rumored Nikon Z8 is also going to be a 61 because it's actually a Sony sensor also.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, for the type of photography that I shoot, you know, for like the beauty editorial and headshots and stuff like that, that sweet spot to me is definitely, I mean, 24 is perfectly great for that. But that 24 to 36 is pretty much the sweet spot. So, I mean, even like the Canon 5D Mark III, didn't they jump to 30 megapixel on the Mark III? Or was it the Mark IV? Jim, you know this.
Sorry, what was that?
Canon on their 5D, was it the Mark III or the Mark IV that they jumped up to the 30 megapixel?
I want to say it was the Mark IV. The Mark III, I think, was 24.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, anywhere in that 24 to 30, mid-30 range for the style of photography that is my primary focus is the sweet spot. But that's for my style of photography. It depends on what you shoot and what you're looking for in what you shoot. I mean, if you're a bird guy that's out there and you need high frame rate and you want to be able to crop in, you know, to 10% of your frame and still have excellent resolution, then, you know, 60 plus megapixels is a big plus for you, you know. So.
Right. But you're not gonna snap off 20 frames a second at that kind of file size.
What is the frame rate on the R4, Jeff?
The frame rate?
Yeah. Isn't it like 13?
I think it's 10.
Oh, is it 10? Well, still, 10 frames a second at 61 megapixels.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's like 3 times faster than the computers in the Sputnik.
Yep.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, I mean that's one of those things. I mean, like I was saying to Jeff, it's not the file size. It's not the amount of space it takes up on the drive to me. It's just the sheer resolution that's a problem to me. You know?
Sure.
So I don't care if it's a 300, 400, 500 meg raw file. You know, I mean, a lot of people, yeah, that does matter because they are limited in their storage space and they are limited in their processing capabilities of their system that they're editing on. That's not an issue for me, so that's not a deterrent to me. It's just the sheer resolution of it that's a deterrent to me for the style of photography that I like to shoot. So, and don't get me wrong, if I was shooting landscapes, you know, that I wanted to print out at, you know, 80 inches on metal and want you to be able to walk up and stick your nose to it and not see pixelation, then absolutely, give me 100 megapixels, you know. But, so, yeah, I mean, it really matters on what is your focus of photography and what are you looking for as to whether or not it's a pro or a con to you. You know.
Sure.
So, to each their own. There's a better tool for each job. You know, they make dozens of different kinds of hammers, but for the different things you're doing with those hammers, they are specialized. So, you know, having a super high resolution camera is, if you think about it, a specialization that works really well for some things, but may not be the best option for other things. So.
Yep. That's just interesting perspective. I've not heard that before, and I think you're dead on. I think that's a really true that it can have more detail than you want sometimes, especially what you're doing.
Oh yeah. So. Yep. Cool. So since you just jumped on here, anything in the photography world or news that has come across your ticker that you want to bring up?
Well, I just bought a new laptop and trying to get away from Photoshop, but it looks like I can't. I was really intrigued by your Capture One. I have seen it used before, and I have used it for a little bit, kind of done the demo thing.
Yeah.
But I really find I don't use it a lot, but when you do use it, that liquify tool, there's just nothing else you can do, you know, without it. And
right, and that
Christmas picture this year, I took my wife's shoes and I made them look like elf shoes. I pointed them, put a big curl on the end, and pointed them up. And it's like I was trying to figure out how would I do that if I didn't have liquify, and there's just no way.
No, I mean, pretty much whenever you get into advanced editing, not retouching, but advanced editing, Photoshop is where you're at. You know, I mean, yeah, there are alternatives. I mean, you can get in there and do all of that in GIMP. You know, for those of you who actually know what GIMP is, but GIMP is an open sourced photo editing app that's been around for years and years and years. And actually, I know guys that they use GIMP for retouching and editing and do amazing jobs. You know, so and I mean, I think. But I would have to confirm, I think there is some kind of warp or liquefy tool in Affinity Photo, but I may be wrong on that. I know that you can do frequency separation and all that stuff in Affinity. So lacking liquefy in it would actually kind of be surprising to me, you know?
Yep, I'll have to look at that. I've got an Affinity license.
On
my Mac, but I've really not used it much.
The other good thing about Affinity is they did a really good job of making it easy for you to switch over from Photoshop. So all of your add-ins and all of your actions and everything actually transfer right into Affinity.
Sure.
So if you're using add-ins and actions and stuff in Photoshop, you can import them directly into Affinity. So.
Right. And I think what hung me up on Affinity is you still have to have Lightroom or some Lightroom.
A raw processor.
For a raw processor for things that you don't take in. There's just quick, you know, retouches, and for the library feature.
Right. And I mean, honestly, when it comes down to the nuts and bolts, Lightroom is still top dog when it comes to organization. I will give that. Yeah. I will give that to Lightroom all day long. Don't get me wrong. I am a Capture One person. I use Capture One. I don't touch Lightroom unless I'm doing a class on it for somebody. But I am fully willing to admit that when it comes to organization, Lightroom is still top dog in that category. So
with Capture One, is there an organization? I mean, so you're a Capture One guy, so you probably don't use a lot of Photoshop stuff, or do you go back and forth?
No. I use Capture One for my import and my initial corrections, like exposure, color, that kind of stuff. And then I export directly to Photoshop, and I do my retouching, and the majority of my work is in Photoshop.
Okay.
All right. And once I have done all of my work in Photoshop, I'll save it because that file will pop right into the library on Capture One. It automatically recognizes that it's there. And then I'll go in and do like my final crop, and if I'm adding a watermark, and I may or may not make some fine-tuned little tweaks with like the levels panel or the advanced color panel, just to tweak things a little bit to my already final retouched image from Photoshop before I export. I like Capture One for the import process because it renders the raw files better than Lightroom, in my opinion, or better than Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw, in my personal opinion. I also like Capture One because shooting tethered to Capture One, it just works. It works 100% of the time for me. I've never had an issue with it. I take my first shot, I make some basic adjustments to that first shot. Every shot after that, it applies those adjustments to every shot that comes through the tether. It just works. Now, when it comes to Lightroom, I have tried to shoot tethered with Lightroom probably 24 times. And I would say better than 50% of the time, it just crapped out at some point and just stopped. The connection was lost. I stopped getting images transferring. It just didn't work reliably for me. And since I like to shoot tethered anytime and every time that I am shooting in studio, that was a really big one for me. So.
Interesting. Okay. So part of that probably is the conversion then, because you're shooting Nikon, right? It has to convert that file on the way into Lightroom?
No, it's just importing a raw file. It's dropping a raw file on your hard drive.
Right.
And then the processing of that raw file is after the fact.
Is it a DNG file?
No, it's a raw file. It doesn't convert the file. It imports it as a raw file. It does not render it to a different file format until you export. Just like Lightroom. Lightroom does not render it to a different file format unless, one, you have that set as your import setting, or two, you've done all of your adjustments and you're exporting it to another file format. Basically, Lightroom, what it does is it's got the Lightroom database, which is basically a database of every single adjustment. So basically this recipe of all of these commands of adjustments that you've made to the raw file. If you go into the folder where that raw file is and you just open up the raw file itself, that raw file is still going to look like the raw file that came out of the camera. It's not going to look like the raw file that you see in Lightroom, because Lightroom is going, okay, I've got this raw file, but I've got this recipe in my database that says I need to apply all of these adjustments, right? And then that's what it displays to you. Same thing with Capture One. Capture One does not destructively change the raw file. It has the raw files there, and then it has a database, or you can actually set it to save all of the changes to a XMP sidecar file. The benefit of the XMP sidecar file is that can actually be read by any photo editing software. So you can actually take that raw file and open it up in Affinity or Lightroom or anything else that will recognize, oh, you know what? It's got this XMP sidecar file that tells me that I need to make all of these adjustments.
Sure.
You know?
Well, I was thinking, because doesn't Canon shoot in like CR2 or something like
Yeah,
that?
Canon is the CR, CR1, CR2 format. And Nikon is the NEF, the NEF. And Sony is the, damn it, I forgot it. Yeah. So they all have their file extensions. They all have their own RAW format.
Okay. Because I had trouble tethering with my Sony. It would do what you're talking about. It would drop out as many times as not. And I shoot with a Pentax K1, and one of supposedly the advantages of that is it uses DNG files, which is Adobe's native file format or whatever. So that thing, I've shot with that thing tethered a lot, and it has never crapped out. And so I was kind of wondering if maybe that has something to do with it.
I know when Sony first came around or came on the block that Capture One did have some issues with Sony. And that's actually one of the reasons why whenever you go to Capture One, there's 3 versions. There's Capture One Pro, there's Capture One Sony, and there's Capture One Fuji.
Oh, interesting.
And Capture One Pro basically handles, Nikon, Canon, Pentax, Phase 1, all of those guys. If you're a Sony guy, there is Capture One Sony, and I believe if you buy any modern Sony camera, you get a free license for the Capture One Sony.
You get like a limited license. There's certain things you can't do.
Yeah, there's certain functionality you don't get with it. But it's still a Capture One license so that you can at least, try it out and play with it and, And I mean, it's still pretty capable because there are a couple of guys that have hit me up that they have that Sony Capture One that they're using. And yeah, I have noticed a few things that I have in my full Capture One Pro that they don't have. But it wasn't anything that limited their ability to do what they needed to do,
Sure.
So it was little stuff. I mean, some stuff on export, like the process recipes were different and, saving process recipes and import presets and stuff. But, yeah.
Sure. So the bottom line is still $10 a month forever to rent software.
Yeah, I mean, you can do Photoshop or the Adobe CC photographers, which is Lightroom and Photoshop for like $10 or $15 a month. Capture One Pro is $19 a month for the subscription, or you can outright buy it for I think $2.99. But the thing is you don't get the updates. When a new version comes out, like they just recently went from 12 to 20. So if you had bought 12, you would have to buy 20. But with the subscription, like I have, it just automatically upgraded to 20. So.
Oh wow! I didn't realize they were doing that.
Yep.
Hey everybody, I gotta get going. I gotta drive up to Palm Springs.
All right, brother. Have a safe trip up to Palm Springs. I mean, it is 10 o'clock and it is Southern California, so traffic is still going to suck, but, Crank the tunes and just enjoy the drive.
All right, man. I'll see you guys later.
All right, man. Have a good night. Cool. So, yeah, I mean, I am not going to sit there and tell you that Capture One is the one and only, and that's what you're going to be using. I will tell you that that's what I use, and I will tell you the reasons why I prefer it. And, I mean, I always tell people, you know what? Give it a try. They have a trial period. You can download it and install it and play with it for, I don't remember, it's either 14 or 30 days or something, absolutely for free. Which is plenty of time for you to decide whether or not this is something that you want to invest the time to get past that learning curve. So. Yep. Cool. And actually, I got Capture One popped up on my screen right now. Oh, yeah. Let's talk about some pictures. And actually, we'll talk about this one right here since we just wrapped up the holidays. And I actually just posted this in our Facebook group earlier today, the Photo Talk discussion group on Facebook. This is Miss Susan or Miss Zuzana, Zuzana on Instagram. And this was actually just a little collaboration beauty editorial for a MUA by the name of Shahida Miles, who just recently moved from New Jersey down to North Carolina, I believe. And I shot this with a D810 and 85 Sigma Art. I shot it with a 600 Godox AD600 or Flashpoint Explorer or Evol. I never can remember which one's which. The 600 Flashpoint. I do know that I shot it at 1/32 power with a 26-inch Cheetah Stand Quick Soup Bowl, the QSB 26, which is basically like a 26-inch beauty dish, and I had diffusion on it, and I had a silver reflector underneath. So that was the setup on it. I did my initial adjustments here in Capture One, and then I took it straight into Photoshop and I did frequency separation and dodge and burn. Frequency separation for the skin retouching itself. Dodge and burn basically just to add some dimension to the hair and a few other things like bringing up the highlights and shadows on the lips to give them a little bit more dimension. So if you zoom in and let it render real quick here. May take it a little bit longer to render. I've got so many things running on here right now with the OBS and Zoom and everything else. Oh, there we go. So you can see I've got skin detail through every single part of this image. But yep. So yeah, that's what it is. And I didn't see anybody post any questions on it when I posted it to the group. So anybody got any questions about that? Process, shooting, whatever. Desiree, I think you're on mute, but I see your lips moving. And I see you nodding, so maybe you're talking to somebody else. Okay, cool. It's one good thing about being able to see the video. So, yeah, cool. All right, well, I am going to bring up the Facebook group because I know several of y'all shared stuff. There we go. Do a quick refresh. All right. Oh, Michael, yours popped up right away. You still on here, Mike? Yeah, there you are. I see you. Nice. One, I love that guitar.
Thank you.
Is that your guitar?
Yeah.
Nice. I love that flame green top on it and the work going down the neck here. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Is that a Fender T-Bucket?
It's a copy.
Okay. I actually had a Fender T-Bucket with the cutaway like that.
Yeah. It's a nice guitar. A friend of mine gave it to me.
Nice.
So, I kind of, and she had asked if she could use it as the prop.
Cool. Before and after applying portrait software, specifically
I didn't want to be specific. You had mentioned kind of a disdain
for Portrait Pro.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. No, you can mention specifics here. That's what it is.
But I don't use it regularly,
mm-hmm.
but occasionally I do. I think it depends on the lighting. Like there, it wasn't used there.
Oops, wrong way.
But there's that image and the image before that I did use it. And in this one, I kind of, the intent was to kind of make it kind of have this question in your head, is that an illustration or is that a photo?
Mm-hmm.
So
when I look at it, it still is a photo. It doesn't have that illustration posterization look to it.
Mm-hmm.
So no, it still absolutely looks like a photo to me. To answer that question right off the bat.
Sure.
I have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
One, which Portrait Pro was it? Was it Portrait Pro or was it Portrait Pro Body and whatever their other for?
I'll tell you in 1 second. I think it's just called Studio Portrait Pro.
Okay.
What do I got here? it. I just got a new computer recently, so I might not have it installed.
That's all right. My other question also pertains to the software itself. Whenever you did it auto detect the face, and did you have to set all of the little control points for like the jawline and corners of the mouth and nose and eyes and all that?
Yeah, yep, that's how it worked. Yep.
Okay. So you set all the control points. Now my other question is did you go through and start tweaking all of those little changes that it provides you, like, you know, light correction and all of this?
Absolutely, yeah. Oh,
okay.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's where my point comes in.
Yeah.
I don't have a disdain for the software if you actually use it to the extent that it is intended to be used.
Yeah, no.
I have a disdain for all these people that buy it thinking it's a one-click fix.
Oh yeah, and what surprises me about it is how they by default turn on that like auto sculpt, which completely takes the face.
Completely screws everything.
You know, so I turn all of that stuff off right away and
Yep.
kind of start from scratch. Really, what I like about it is the retouch brush and how it kind of does blemish control.
Right.
You know, that's I think what I use it the most. In this particular case, actually, I had to do a lot of retouching after the fact to get rid of the fake eye that it made. Which I find pretty funny that it does that.
Yeah, that's it creates these alien eyes.
Yeah. I do like using it occasionally, but you know, and I agree. Too many people think it's a one-click.
Exactly. They basically just, you know, load it and then accept all the defaults and move on.
Right.
And that's not, you know, they wouldn't give you the ability to adjust all of the different settings if their intention was for it to be a one-click fix.
Right.
You know? And like I said, my point was always, it's not a one-click fix. Right. If you actually go in and take the time to set all the control points and adjust all of the different settings, you can get a decent to good result with it. You know, you're not going to get an editorial, you know, beauty headshot out of it, but you can get a decent result. And for something like this, you can get a great result. But you're going to invest just as much time going in managing all of those settings as you could or you would doing it with other tools, like just going into Photoshop and doing it. And you'll end up with a better result with the same amount of time invested using another tool like Photoshop, you know? So that was my disdain, is all these guys are buying it thinking it's a one-click fix, and if they actually took the time to learn it and invest the time in using it correctly, they could do the same thing in Photoshop with a better end result. That was my point.
Sure. Okay. Good.
You know.
Good. I just, you know, I'd seen it. Maybe I didn't look deeply into it, but you know.
If I open up Photoshop and pull down my filter menu, you'll see Portrait Pro sitting right there. Right. Every time they release a new version, I install the new version just to see if it's improved any. You know, because I like to keep up on it and see for myself firsthand.
Yeah, I like to check out the different applications. I really want to check out the Capture One, but it's like I feel like I have so many years invested in Photoshop and Lightroom. And
well, here's my thing.
As well, so
let me say something for you on that. Capture One is not a Photoshop replacement.
Sure, no.
Capture One is a Lightroom replacement.
Right.
So if you do the majority of your work in Photoshop and you're just using Lightroom for your import and basic adjustments, then it might be an option for you. But a lot of people, you know, the catalog and organization of Lightroom is what is really good for them. So Capture One might not be for them. Now, if it is really just about adjustments, or you're one of those that uses, you know, Adobe Camera Raw, basically you're bringing a raw image directly into Photoshop and open up the Adobe Camera Raw, then Capture One is absolutely a serious consideration, because it is a much better RAW processor than Adobe Camera Raw. you know. So
I think you're probably similar, but I kind of have a good feeling for applications in general, so I use a combination of everything, like you said, just find the best tool for the job and do what I can. And I think the other image that I shared, which is a before and after, is I was going for less stylized the other way, less stylized final. So the final isn't as blown out looking and as illustrative looking. It's more like supposed to be like a cleaned up photo.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see the retouching, but it is not overdone, and I like that it's still left kind of raw. Like I can still see, freckles and a few little blemishes and stuff on her skin, and the highlights and everything are not blended out and smooth to No, I like it. It's a nice natural edit. So, I prefer. Oops, wrong way. I prefer this one. I like the composition of this better than this.
Cool.
Yeah. No, very, very cool images, man. I like it. I like the lighting. I like the moodiness and just kind of almost like she's just sitting here. Can you explain your actual lighting in the shooting?
Yeah, I think I saw a bunch of images. You guys were talking about one beauty dish, so I had one beauty dish. I'm trying to remember what the size was. It's a Pro Photo.
Mm-hmm.
It had a grid on it.
I was gonna say, was it diffused and gridded?
Yeah, it was diffused and gridded.
The only reason I asked is because the fall off is so quick.
Right.
So it's almost like she is in a spot of light.
Right.
So.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I like it, man. It really, having it gridded really keeps a lot of the light falling on the background elements and everything, so they're not a distraction to the image.
Right. Exactly. And I did have to retouch out the cat that destroyed the arm of the couch there by her leg.
Yeah. Oh well, we all love our cats.
Yeah, we do.
Luckily, my cat doesn't do that to furniture.
Yeah, you're lucky.
Yeah, well, actually, you know what? That's a lie, because she pretty much destroyed the entire back corner of my leather sectional in New Jersey. But since I've moved to Arkansas, she has destroyed no furniture. Maybe she was just not happy with Jersey. Yeah. So. Anybody else want to comment on Jim's pictures here? Okay, cool.
Yes, thanks for the feedback. Appreciate it.
Covered it.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, let's see here. That's Mike. Let's go into the CC album. All right. I was going to jump on Desiree's, but I'm looking at her camera and she's not sitting at her computer. Oh, here she comes. She's running up. Here she comes.
Good timing.
Perfect timing, because we're going to pull up Desi.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. All good. Which one do you want us to start on, Desiree?
The first one.
This one.
Yeah. That's Fifi.
That's Fifi.
She's one of the instructors at Elite Pole and Fitness. She's actually one of the first ones that started to train me when I started there 2.5 years ago. And she was emceeing for a while, because the second picture is Amy, and that's the owner. She normally does it, but she was just doing it that one time because Amy was getting ready for her performance. So I just captured that.
Gotcha. So I'm assuming this was actually at that event, first off, because I can see the speaker and her microphone, and I see people in the background, so obviously it's an event. I also see the lighting in the mirror that we were talking about in the previous pictures. So.
Yep, that was the same day.
The
same day.
Yep. Actual location of the lighting, just looking at the lights falling on her, obviously there's a light somewhere over here, camera right, because we've got this nice bright highlight that I can see running down the front of her thigh and leg. And obviously there's a light somewhere camera left because I can see the shadow on her forearm being cast by her chest.
Yep.
So you've got camera right and camera left with your lighting, so cross-lighting her. Overall exposure looks good. I'm not going to talk about the distractions of the background in the mirror because we've talked about that previously in some of the other images. One thing I am going to mention is, honestly, I feel like your focus, it somehow focused on the mirror because these people back here look sharp to me and she looks out of focus to me.
Okay.
Do you see that? Like, I don't see any detail anywhere on her from head to toe that actually looks in focus. It looks just slightly soft. And then when I look at what's going on in the mirror, everything in the mirror looks in focus to me. Do you see that?
Yeah, I see it. Yeah, I didn't realize it at first, but yeah, now I see it.
Yeah. So that leads me into a question. In your camera, what kind of focus mode are you using? Are you using single point focus? Are you using group focus?
Single point.
Single point. Now, whenever you did it, did you basically drop your focus point on her, lock your focus and take the shot, or did you find focus and recompose?
I pretty much locked it on her and took the shot. I was sitting in the corner, like, because she noticed I was there because she's looking right at me, but I was sitting in the corner and I just, like, pointed at her and shot.
Yeah. Now, I mean, honestly, for event photography and whatever, they're going to throw this on their Facebook page and whatever. It's not so out of focus that I think that it's an issue because, honestly, you didn't even notice it. They're not going to notice it. They're going to see it and they're going to recall the event. They're going to recall the memory. They're going to recall the emotions and whatever else. They're not going to notice that it is just slightly out of focus like I did. So I don't think that that's a terrible thing. I just wanted to point it out to you. Right?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, who else wants to jump on this? Anybody else?
I think that was it. It's not, like you said, it's not so bad, but you can notice the difference when you pointed out the sharpness on the mirror.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, a lot of people probably wouldn't notice that unless I pointed it out to them. And that's one of the things when you're sitting here talking to a group of photographers, we do notice those things. But when you're providing it to, your friends or whatever, and they're not looking at that. They're looking at, oh, do I look pretty? Do I look fat? They're not noticing that, oh, wait a second. The girl in the reflection's just slightly more in focus than I was, So, don't get me wrong. If I'm sitting there shooting an event and everything, I absolutely want to try and make sure that my subject is what is in focus. But I'm just saying that if that was the one and only image of this part of the event happening, then you have that decision of, well, do I give it to them even though it's just barely out of focus? Or do I say, no, I can't give that to them, and then that's a memory they don't have?
Yeah.
I think in the case of this one that it's acceptable enough that I would give it to her anyways, just to, have, because it's not something that a lot of people would notice unless it was pointed out to them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I definitely get it.
So. Yep. I mean, other than that, lighting we've already talked about on this and previous ones. It's the same lighting that didn't change. And like I said, the distractions in the background, that was kind of unavoidable because of what the event was and the way the venue's set up and everything. So, I might try and clone out the exit sign because the red of the exit just kind of draws my eye straight to it because the only other thing in frame that has red on it is her ears.
Yeah.
So that kind of, and the leading line even draws me right into it, but yeah. Yep.
Okay. That's not a big deal.
All right, this one. Now when I look, see how in the background all of the reflections in the mirror are out of focus? And I look at her and I can see the zippers, I can see the microphone, I can see her eye, I can see her nostril, her lips. They're all in focus. So you hit the focus on her, and I can see everything in the background is slightly out of focus. So you managed to hit the focus on her in this shot. And obviously the lighting hasn't changed or anything else. Your angle of shooting has changed, obviously, a little bit, because I can see that door in the background where everybody was kind of hiding is just out of frame now. So.
Yeah, I was sitting in a seat at that time.
Yeah, I mean, overall, honestly, what I would probably do with these images is I might crop it in just a little bit more. I don't mean really, really tight, but maybe lose this top, inch. And maybe bring it in a little bit here, because let me do this. Let me download it. Because I know that part of the intent of this was to actually show off that, yeah, you're in a pole dance studio and blah, blah, blah. So I'm not going to sit there and try and crop in so much that you lose the context of where they're at, So I might just come in a little bit above head so that we do have this space and the pole behind her and everything. So you kind of keep that context.
Okay.
Yeah. Because there was a lot more going on that I don't feel really benefited the image so much.
That makes sense.
Maybe something more like that.
Okay. That's not too crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she's really short, so that's why I went in with the crop that I did.
Yeah.
So I don't want to make her seem smaller than she already is.
Well, actually, when you have a short person and you have a whole bunch of frame, it makes them look even smaller. And if you fill the frame with them, it makes them look larger. The other thing is, while you're actually shooting, if you have a short person that you don't want to look really short, shoot at a slightly lower angle, and it will make them look a little taller.
Okay.
Because one, it'll put their head higher in comparison to the background images, but it also makes it feel like you're looking up to them, which you already are in this shot. I feel like you were probably shooting right here about hip height on her, but if you dropped even lower and shot, it would have put her head up here, so this would have been coming through her shoulders or something, and it would have just made her feel even taller,
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Good to know.
No, I do not want to save. Cool. Who else wants to comment on anything? I can't just be the only one talking here.
I think both of those images are good examples of the color cast, because this one seems like it's got a bit of a color cast to me, and the other one didn't. So I don't know.
It's a very interesting situation because you are in a studio that has purple light. So the color
I see. Right. Okay. The color of the lights is changing. I see the lights on them.
Right. If you look right here in the mirror, you can see these purple lights right here behind the black curtains. And then the walls themselves are painted a certain color, and so there's a very interesting color cast from the walls. And then the cast of the off-camera flash is obviously going to be different. I do feel like, and you may hate to hear this, Desiree, I feel like it is still slightly green on the tint. It's not horribly green, but it is slightly green on the tint.
The other one didn't look so much, but I didn't realize the lights were changing in the room.
Yeah. Here the white balance looks good. Actually, Desiree, when you're shooting, is your white balance set on auto? Or are you set? Okay. Set your white balance on a fixed white balance when you're shooting. Because what happens is when you have your white balance set on auto, your camera is calculating what the white balance should be on each and every shot, which varies because it's basically sampling and doing an average of what's in frame. So if, as you change angles and stuff, if you have more white in it or more purple in it or more pink in it, that all affects the average. So, honestly, set your white balance, especially if you're shooting off-camera flash and you have a Nikon D810, set it at 5560K.
Okay.
All right, so you are going to manually set your white balance, and the setting you want it set on is 5560.
It's already there.
It wasn't on auto?
No, it was already at 5560K.
Interesting. Okay, right, so in your editing, are you doing like auto white balance in Lightroom or something and letting it choose the white balance?
Honestly, I'm not going near white balance with this. With these two, I didn't go near it this time. Well, actually, no, I didn't go near it with any of them. And the reason why she has that slightly green tint on her is because she also had the same type of lights facing her, and they were shifting green. So I didn't do that.
Oh, okay, that makes sense then. That was the missing key right there. Because I was gonna say, I can tell that the something changed because I'm looking at the purple of the wall right behind both of them, and it changes. So now that you tell me that there was a green light that was shifting in there, now it makes sense that you do have your camera set on a manual white balance, and yet it looks like the tint changed. That's because of that green light.
Yeah, the lights can change from purple, green, red.
Okay, that all makes sense to me now. So you weren't doing anything wrong. So we're good there.
and for all the performances, she has the lights changing for the performances, because there was like Halloween performances, there were more flaunting performances, then there were the ones that were up in the air. So the color of the lights she put to match the performances that were going on.
Yeah.
So for some of them, she kept them purple. For the one Halloween related one that I did, they were green.
Gotcha.
All of them. So,
cool.
And I guess she didn't realize the ones in front of her were still changing green. So I guess she didn't pay it any mind. But yeah, I didn't do that. That was the light that was staring right at her.
Yep. Cool. So, on that note, is there anything you specifically wanted to point out and ask about in these images?
No, you guys pretty much told me everything. There were two like random ones that I just grabbed while Amy and Fifi were talking.
Cool.
So I took a lot from it.
Gotcha. All right, John DiArcangelo dropped this one in here, but I love this shot. That's all I'm going to say, because I know he always joins in on Coffee and Cameras on Saturday morning, so I'm going to just save that one for Coffee and Cameras on Saturday morning when he's actually on here and can talk about it with us. And who we got here? Hardik. Whoa. Hardik. I do not know how to pronounce your name, and I am so sorry. I know you're not on here right now. Very interesting shot. I like black and white. I like street photography. I am very not feeling the fact that he is sitting in a shadow and she is sitting in what appears to be either hard sunlight or an off-camera flash of some sort. I can see where the shadow begins right there on her arm, and he is sitting off in the darkness and she's sitting out in the bright light, and it just doesn't work for me. Yeah. Jump on this, guys. Somebody come on with me on this. Let's feed off of each other.
I'm with you. It looks like a portrait of his left arm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little odd.
I think an image like this needs a lot more context.
Yeah.
To really stand out. It's a street shot. Yes, it's got OCF. There's a lot of elements in here that it really depends on the direction of the image. Mm-hmm. What is the image for? Because that will tell us, okay, does this fit the mold, or did this miss the mark a little? So until we get that context, I don't think it would be really fair.
I really have nothing I can jump on it without talking directly with Hardick, who added it to the folder. But I mean, when I initially look at it, I see where it could definitely be a interesting shot, and having some context to it would help with that. But the first thing that just jumps straight out to me is just the fact that he is literally in a deep shadow and she is in a bright light. And they're right there. You know, they're embracing, and it basically cuts between them. And then obviously his arm is out here in that bright light also.
Well, that's why I feel like we need more context, because that seems like it's a little too deliberate.
Yeah.
Right. If it accompanied an article or something, it could make sense.
Yeah. Right. Or a series.
But here's my thought on that also is, shouldn't a image be able to stand on its own without someone explaining to you why?
Yes and no.
Yeah, yes and no. That was kind of a question to get a discussion going.
Yeah, this is an age old debate.
Yeah.
Yep. No, it definitely does, and that's why it's like, okay, just throwing this one image up here. If there's context behind the image and it's part of a series or anything else that deserves some explanation to give us an idea on the good, bad, whatever of why, then I think, maybe it was a mistake in posting this alone without the context.
Right.
If the direction of this was to be a portrait on a certain level, again, there's just too many questions of why this image is.
Yeah, exactly. So I am actually, what I'm going to do is later on, I'm going to comment on, actually, you know what? Let's comment on this.
And quite frankly, it kind of reminds me a little bit of some of the, now this is a little loose, a little bit of Vogue, a little bit of Chanel. If we saw a diamond earring in here, if we saw a video commercial, we've all seen them, black and white. It's zooming in, it's panning. We do a wipe transition, things of that sort. We've seen those images before.
Right.
And it's mostly to focus in on her and the product, or just her. And yeah, I could justify cutting him out in a certain way, but again, we need that context.
Yeah.
And to Josh's comment, I think if it could have been an image that stood out on its own, maybe if it was done differently, and then also achieved whatever that context was.
You know what? If there was a different background here, if this was an alleyway and he was leaned up against the wall and she was just outside of the opening of the alleyway, it would completely make sense to me. Because I would feel like, oh yeah, he's standing in the shadow of the alleyway and she's standing in the sunlight that's shining, through the opening of. But I feel like they're standing in a parking lot.
Yep. We've got a rollerblader, we've got a safety officer,
right,
a valet.
And absolutely nothing in frame that says, oh yeah, there should be a shadow here.
So, but yeah, with the context, we could definitely go further. We can each of us come up with our own dozen corrections.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe that is actually the intent of the image, is for us to sit here and go, what is going on here? Why?
Yeah.
Right.
That would be something that I would do, is shoot something really odd and be like, here you go. Just to make people think about it.
Well, like Jim's saying, it could be, what if it was a frame in a photographic novel,
Mm-hmm.
you know? I mean,
Yeah.
Everything did have a purpose there. You know?
Exactly.
So.
Or even in a series of images. I could see how in a series of images that are all displayed, you know, together, how you could maybe lead into that.
Tell a story.
You know, tell a story with it. Who knows? Maybe they're standing there watching the eclipse and that's where the shadow is starting to come across. Who knows? You know? But, yeah. Interesting. Now, getting past the shadow. I feel like composition-wise... Composition-wise, I really don't like the bridge running through the middle of their heads. I feel that that's just kind of weird. I feel like there's a lot of distractions going on in the background. And they don't make sense to me considering like the window of this car looks like it's more in focus than the people that are obviously closer to them or closer to the subject. So I'm wondering if they did some kind of blur in post, maybe? Or is this even maybe a background swap? Because, I mean, we've got really sharp edges on them all the way up. All the way around them in every aspect.
Right.
There's so many questions. I mean, I can sit here and look at this and there's so many questions I have. That car really throws me, though. Because, like, the sharp shadows... under the car, sharp dark shadows on their car and the window frame look more in focus than these things that are obviously in the foreground to the car. So my logic is that that car should be at least as out of focus, if not a little bit more out of focus than these things in the foreground. So that's really throwing me.
Yeah, the car's kind of a thing for me too.
My other question is maybe it's not that it's more in focus. Maybe it's contrast that he has applied. So that transition from dark to light gives that illusion that it's more in focus. Because, I mean, honestly, what's sharpening? It's adjusting the micro contrast. So maybe the fact that these shadows are really, really dark and that's a white car and it just, that contrast makes it appear optically like it's more in focus, but it's not really. So many questions, Hardik. Good job. You've got me just going, what? I don't know what to think or talk about on this. Wow. There's a lot of little distractions I probably would have gotten rid of or composed my shot while shooting differently. I don't know. Jim, Mike, Steven, Desi. Sound off.
I don't know what to think.
Yeah, not really much more to say about it. I don't.
Okay, then we won't spend any more time on it. I already commented on it, so maybe he'll get back to us on that for another episode in the future. Oh, Steven. Hey, Steven.
You know where this was shot?
I know where this was shot. This was shot in that place down in California.
California?
I'm joking. This was shot at the Silk Studios in North Jersey at my workshop, and you shot that with a Nikon D850 and a 135 DC.
I did.
Yes.
I confess.
Yes, I saw you do it. I was there. I witnessed it happening. Okay, so for lighting, I already know that this was actually shot with a 300 watt Blaze flash point, and it was actually in a 90 centimeter deep parabolic, because it was actually this guy right here behind me, which y'all can't see because my video is not on for the Zoom meeting. but it's the Cheetah Stand RB90. It's a 90 centimeter deep parabolic, and I was using the chopstick focusing system, which basically fires the strobe back into the modifier rather than out the front of it. And you can slide it in and out so you can use it to focus the medium light. And then obviously looking at the catch lights, you can see that we were also using the Bowflector as the reflector underneath. What you may not be able to tell is that the background is actually a bunch of crinkled aluminum foil taped to the wall. And that there were two AD200s, one on each side. One was gelled with red, one was gelled with purple. And if you look, you can see here some of the pinks and purples and everything in all of this really deep bokeh that's going on in the background behind her. So, Stephen, in posting this, my question to you is, what do you want us to address?
Well, this is my first stab at really using the mixer brush for smoothing out skin tones.
Okay.
That's really what the photo's about for me. I mean, I did some other stuff too, but that's really what's going on here.
All right, looking at it, it looks good to me. I mean, I don't see any glaring issues with the underlying color tones and stuff where you've blended and smoothed. I mean, obviously, if we took and had the before and I could toggle them back and forth between each other quickly, we could see if you had shifted any shadows or anything. But since we don't have that, there's no context to say, oh yeah, no, you definitely shifted this and whatever and restructured her face. Just knowing what she looks like, I don't see anything that is blatantly shifted out of place or restructured. It looks like Jenny. We all know what she looks like. That looks like Jenny. Yeah, I mean, for the mixer brush itself, I might have, worked that temple a little bit more. There is a little bit of blotchiness there that I personally would have worked. But overall, I mean, it looks good. Nothing looks overworked, which is a big plus. There's a lot of people that overwork with the mixer brush. So, that looks good to me.
All right, thank you.
Yep. I will give you a little bit of a tip, and actually, you know what? Let me do this. Let's download her. Save. Photoshop. And let's go ahead and do a frequency separation. All right. I'm going to show you a little tip here. This is an annoyance to me, is specifically with shooting women and sometimes men that have been outdoors a lot, so they have a tan. It's the transition of the tones from the forehead into the hairline, and it's more so typically with women that have a lot of heavy makeup, because you'll have an obvious difference between the tone of their forehead and their scalp, and it stands out like a sore thumb. I address this with the mixer brush. Since that's what you wanted to talk about was mixer brush, I take my mixer brush, and the first thing that I will do, oops, I don't need an ink pen, I need my tablet pen, is I will drag that color up into the hairline, so I have a transition, and you saw it got brighter, all right? What I'll then do is I'll go up into the hair, and I'll drag the hair color back into it to bring the color down. And I'll just work it like that. Basically blending that into more of a natural look. So now, and I just did that quickly. That was the quick and dirty. That wasn't me trying to be a perfectionist. So now, whenever I toggle that on and off, you see the difference?
Yes.
How I've gotten rid of all of this discoloration and that ugly transition to the scalp, and just made it nice and clean looking. You see that?
Yeah.
That's my quick tip for tonight with the mixer brush. But other than that, I mean, looking at it, you did an overall good job. I mean, like I said, nothing looks overworked, which tends to be a bigger problem. I mean, underwork's not a problem because you can always come back in and do a little more if you decide, you know. Overworking it, then, you know, then you're getting to the point where you're just pushing around smears. Right. One thing I just noticed scrolling down is it almost looks like the side of her palm's a little dirty. So what I would probably do there is also on the mixer brush, just start right up here and kind of drag that skin tone right down through there. So I've now fixed that smudge on the side of her hand. So, you know, that's one of the things that I love about the mixer brush is how powerful it is if you know what you can do with it, you know, and how quickly you can do it. You know, and just like if I wanted to, these are not bags, but say I wanted to brighten underneath her eyes, I can bring up from the cheek and open those shadows under her eyes and open the shadows beside her nose. And this is just, like I said, quick and dirty. So now I've kind of brightened her eyes a little bit more just by doing that. So we've addressed the hairline, we addressed the side of the hand, we addressed the eyes, and there was nothing wrong with the eyes, by the way, Steven. That was literally me just showing an example of something else you can do. Right. I actually liked what you had with the eyes. Having a little bit of shadow under the eyes is more natural because our eyes are orbs, so there is a natural subtle shadow underneath the eye because they are orbs. You know, they stick out from the face. So there is a natural change in exposure from here to the top of the cheek. I was just giving an example. But now whenever I toggle on and off, you can see just the subtle little changes, you know, the side of the hand, the hairline, all of that. That I did each one of those in a matter of a couple seconds with just the mixer brush on the low layer. You know. Oh, and I forgot the side of the nose. So you can see what I did.
Wow, that's great.
So, yep. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about this image?
No, that's it. I think I shot it square in the camera. You know, you can set the camera to be square, have a square format. So I think I shot it this way.
Really? In the 850 you can shoot square?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Very cool, actually. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Sorry.
Jenny B was happy with it, so I'm happy.
Yeah.
That's how I measure the photograph.
Talk. I'm sorry, I'm just playing with it a little bit.
I was just watching what you're doing here. I mean, I darkened the background and threw a vignette around it, so it's you're not going to see the purple crinkly.
No, I wasn't trying to get the purple crinkly. I just felt like she needed to be a little bit brighter, like her skin tones, and her skin tones fall right there in the mid-tones, but I don't want to bring up her hair so much because then it starts looking like that fake HDR. So I was trying to bring up the mid-tones without bringing up the shadows in her hair too much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm also bringing up the highlights a bit. So yeah, if I did something like that.
Hey Josh.
Yeah.
While you're doing that, it's going to be on and off topic. Omar just bought me a Nikon D850.
I told you that he needs to be my sugar daddy, not your sugar daddy.
He just sent me the receipt. He's like, so did you want this one too? I'm like...
Omar. Listen.
He's like, I bought you a Nikon D850. I'm like, For what? It's like,
just for
we already
being
have the
you.
750 and the 810. We may as well just add to the collection. And get the 850.
Just for being you. You know what's gonna happen is I'm gonna meet him in Kentucky because we've already agreed that we're gonna meet halfway, and I am gonna get him lit. And next thing you know, I'm gonna have a whole new camera bag full of new stuff.
I mean, Jim, I'll come and visit you, and I'll bring my cat so you can meet Tommy.
Oh, that's gonna be good.
I can't believe you just. All right then. Well,
all right.
More questions when I start using the camera.
Tommy meets some horses.
You got Steven right here. Steven's an 850 user, so any 850 questions, Steven, you're on it.
I'll be more than glad to tell you what I know.
There you go.
Thank you. Thank you. All right then.
All right. Other than that, was there any other things you wanted to talk about on this image, Steven?
I think that's it. You know, that was the main focus of this image, was playing with the mixer brush really for the first time.
Yeah.
Instead of relying on some of the plugins that I've been using.
Gotcha. What plugins were you using?
Nick and Imaginomic.
Yeah, that's the two I use. I mean, I honestly don't use Nick for any kind of skin smoothing or anything like that. Honestly, what I use Nick for is tonal contrast, because it's quicker for me to do tonal contrast with Nick than me to actually sit there and do it with curves or levels or anything. You know, because I've got a couple of presets that I've honed down to like my go-tos. You know, you can kind of create your own Nick recipes for tonal contrast. So I'm not sitting there every time needing to create a curves or levels adjustment layer and trying to find what works. It just works. So I'll open Color Effects Pro and apply. I have like a half dozen different tonal contrast recipes that I've created, and I'll just click through them, and whichever one works, I'm good. Instead of sitting there trying to create points on a curves adjustment or move my sliders around on a levels, it just saves me time by doing that instead, you know. And really that's what a add-in or plug-in or action should be for, is to save you time, you know. So.
And Josh, just to point out the top of her head where you were mentioning like where the darkness is. That is a part of her contour that's actually meant to slim down the face, and that's why that part is darker. Because for women of her complexion, when they contour, they have to use a darker powder or cream. However,
don't be hating on the white girls, Desiree.
That's not a tan. That's actually a part of her makeup. It's
no, I understand.
Slim down her face.
The shadow doesn't bother me. It's the transition from makeup to bare scalp that bothers me typically. So that's where I usually try to blend things out, just so that it's not such a... And I mean, honestly, 95% of the people are never going to notice that. But to me, I notice it every single time on every single person's picture. So...
Well,
for me,
now they've shown me.
Now that I've pointed it out to all of y'all, now every one of y'all are going to notice it every time.
I'm stuck with it.
I've just created more work for you. You're welcome.
That was great, though. That I haven't used the mixing brush, and now I just looked it up while you guys were talking, and seeing that it was out since CS6, I feel like an idiot, because that looks amazing.
Yeah, I mean... The thing is on that, oops, sorry, I closed it, damn it. Basically what that is I was using the mixing brush inside of frequency separation.
Right.
So I was using it on the low layer, which only has the colors and tones. It doesn't have any of the details on it.
That was great. The wait was worth it for just that information.
Yeah, gotcha.
Help me out.
Cool. All right. So did we have any others in the CC folder? Because we are, holy shit, we're at 2 hours, and I've decided I was going to start cutting this stuff down to like an hour and a half.
Yeah, too much to drink.
Time flies when you're having fun.
No, exactly. I enjoy the social and the company, so it is what it is.
Good stuff.
Yep. Cool. All right, well, guys. I mean, honestly, and unless anybody else has anything they want to bring up, I guess we can kind of wrap this up and make our way out.
Well, good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
Have a good New Year.
Don't thank me. Thank y'all for joining in.
Yeah, good going into the new year with this stuff, Josh. Good to see it all happening.
Yeah, cool. All right, guys. Well, I will talk to y'all later. I'll see y'all around on Facebook, or maybe I'll hear from y'all Saturday morning on Coffee and Camera, or next week on the Bourbon Hour. So,
Great.
Y'all have a good evening.
You too, darling.
All right. Good night.